Hey everybody, my name is Keith Sherburn. I'm the chair of the Board for Operational Government Meteorologists through AMS, and I'm pleased to welcome you here to our next installment of the Origins series. And I'm pleased to have a couple of guests with me today, a couple of maybe familiar faces for those of you familiar with the Board for Operational Government Meteorologists. But I'll introduce them both and we'll dive into some questions. So first up, Dr. Stefan Bieda. He's the chief of the Sphere Fire Public and Winter Weather Services branch in the Analyze, Forecast, and Support Office within National Weather Service headquarters. And second up is Lexy Elizalde-Garcia. She is at the Warning Decision Training Division as a meteorologist software instructor. So a lot of words there in all those titles. And I think to start out here, because most of the guests on this show thus far have been within maybe the traditional operational space. You know, they're operational meteorologists or they're management within an operational office. But your titles are a little bit different. So starting with you, Stefan, can you tell us a little bit about what you do there as the branch chief?
Well, thank you, Keith, for this invitation. And yeah, the branch that I oversee is critical in helping lead the agency's efforts in those four topics of severe weather, fire weather, public weather, and winter weather. We support the traditional meteorological operations by trying to identify policy that the agency can work through. We also assess and determine how our current policies are doing through things like assessing statistics, identifying what has been working, what has not been working, and also supporting our agency's director, Ken Graham. We have been quite active in this space over the last few years. Another part that we do within our branch is we also collaborate our efforts with emergency management and various agencies at the high level. So normally a lot of the forecast offices are much more focused on their local partners or regional partners. And then the regional headquarters tend to work with FEMA regions or with the regional partners at the agencies at that level. Here, we end up talking directly with the agency heads or at least a designee and trying to figure out, well, what can we do to help with ensuring public safety and community preparedness on a national scale? Other efforts that our branch continue to support, in fact, will also begin supporting in some capacity, is we work with the World Meteorological Organization and support the agency director on international collaboration. Some of the highlights that I can point to is that our severe program does collaboration with Environment Canada. Our fire weather program does collaboration with the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, and almost all of them do some sort of collaboration with the World Meteorological Organization or our European partners. So that gives you an idea of the scale that we work at here at National Weather Service headquarters.
Very good. Yeah, you wear a lot of hats there, Stefan, it sounds like.
Just a few, just a few.
Just a few, yeah. And yeah, I was pleased to be the chair-elect under you when you were chair of the Board for Operational Government Meteorologists as well. So we'll kind of dive into some AMS service a little bit later, but wanted to point that out. Thanks again for your service to BOGM. All right, Lexy, turning it over to you. What is your job like at Warning Decision Training Division?
Thank you also for having me. So my job at the Warning Decision Training Division changes a lot. So not only do I teach brand new meteorologists who just get hired into the National Weather Service by assisting in creating modules and reviewing modules that they take at a distance before they come and do the radar and applications course. But I also help teach during the radar and applications course. And then aside from those weeks, because we typically only have about 6 per year at most, aside from that, I do a lot with AWIPs. I'm constantly doing job sheets and various like build trainings for AWIPs and trying to get people spun up on just any new updates that have come to AWIPs and just all things new. So like hazard services convective that will be coming out. That's what a lot of my focus has been on, is trying to not only bug test and learn the software, but also teach the software to a lot of our beta sites that are currently using it. And we have about 12 of those test sites, and several of them have already issued severe products with hazard services convective and have enjoyed it. So that's exactly what I like to hear. Additionally, a lot of my work isn't only just with regular forecasters, but it's also with the SUs, any like subject matter experts at offices related to convective weather and even fire weather. just constantly working with a ton and a variety of people, even software developers too, just trying to make sure that the training is coming out in an easy to communicate and effective manner.
Very cool. And the hazard services, could you talk a little bit to what that is for the non-NWS folks in the audience?
Absolutely. So the National Weather Service meteorologists typically use WarnGen, which is like a suite within AWIPS to issue warning products, which for us, that's like severe weather and fire weather and or like fire warnings, and then tornado warnings and stuff like that. But for us, with Hazard Services Convective, that's just creating a new suite of operations. So it eventually will retire WarnGen, and this will be a new customizable interface that is easier for each local office to add in their own specific like calls to actions and um, specific cities and their path casts and stuff like that. It's a much easier way to do things than it was done previously. And it's also a great way to be able to track your warnings and see them right there in front of your face while you're continuing to go through operations.
Yeah, as a meteorologist in the Weather Service, it's very convenient to have this consolidated framework instead of 3 or 4 different ways of creating our products. So we're all looking forward to seeing the next iteration of hazard services make it into operations. So thanks for the work that you're doing there. Um, so this is the Origins series, of course. So we like to take a look back at how people got to where they are as well. And Stefan, I know that you, before you got into headquarters, you worked at some field offices. You also had some time at the DoD as a meteorologist. So could you talk a little bit about your background and getting to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So my federal career started in 2009. So it's been 15 years already. It flies by very quickly. And it's been a fun ride so far. I did 4 years with the United States Air Force as a meteorologist with the 25th Operational Weather Squadron. For 3 years, I was in charge of training and overseeing all of the technical aspects of the units with regards to things like new methods and new capabilities, bringing in the research to the operations. So the position was called Science and Operations Officer, which is ironically very similar to what the National Weather Service does, except for the 25th Operational Weather Squadron, it was for the 13 Western states. So the unit usually was around the size of about 200 to 250 enlisted and officer personnel. And right after I graduated with my doctorate degree, I was placed in the position of Director of Training and Standards, where I led the unit's overall training capabilities and also assessing how effective our training was and what we were trying to do in the future with regards to our capabilities of the unit. Of course, sequestration happened in 2012, and that was a lot of turmoil that occurred in the budgets of a lot of federal agencies. And so I found my way over to the National Weather Service, where I worked as a forecaster out of the Pendleton, Oregon office from 2013 to 2015, and also did some time as an incident meteorologist there and as the acting science and operations officer. A lot of my focus during my time at that part of the agency was actually the drought. There was a pretty significant drought that occurred during those 2 years. Lots of wildfires in the Pacific Northwest and a lot of wildfire smoke. So did a lot of collaborations with tribal entities in the Pacific Northwest to talk about climate and also engaged with Washington and Oregon on how we could do better information and dissemination of alerts for air quality. In 2015, I was picked up as a science and operations officer in Amarillo, Texas, and was there for 6 years. In fact, that's where I actually met Lexy because we brought her on as a student volunteer and later as a student intern. And during those 6 years, it flew by so fast because of all the weather that tends to occur out there in the southern high plains. I think I've had the largest wildfire outbreak that I've ever seen in my career occur during that time. Palo Duro Canyon, we had a lot of heat waves that occurred there. So I had a lot of focus on trying to improve our heat messaging for the region because we had a lot of folks internationally coming. There was no shortage of severe weather. In fact, I'm sure Lexy has quite a few pictures of that. So while she's out chasing, I was there sitting in operations, flinging out the warnings for tornadoes and severe thunderstorms like crazy, or overseeing the staff because operations was a big part of my title in that role. And then I was also engaged with a lot of university partners, Texas Tech University, Texas A&M University, West Texas A&M, and University of Oklahoma, and trying to bring over the latest capabilities, such as the Warning Forecast System, which was one of our major collaborations with the National Severe Storms Lab. After my 6 years there, I transitioned over to National Weather Service headquarters as the National Science Officer, where I led some of the major initiatives here for research to operations and helped oversee the 120 plus science and operations officer for the agency. And then after a couple of years, transitioned to this role. And suffice it to say, it's been incredibly busy because there's been a lot of attention, whether that's from the White House or congressionally, on things like severe weather, fire weather. We had a lot of attention on New York after the Buffalo blizzard event, which required a lot of high level coordination there. And then, of course, extreme heat was a major part of what has been going on with messaging. And we actually are a co-lead of NIHIS, the National Interagency Heat Health Information System. And so we work with climate, a lot of the climate offices, as well as the CDC, on trying to figure out what we can do to be able to better message extreme heat to the public. So that's been my career over 15 years in a nutshell.
Excellent. Thanks, Stefan. Yeah, between severe weather, winter weather, heat, cold, fire, there's always something going on, right? How do you get sleep?
What's sleep?
There you go. Sleep is coffee, right?
Exactly.
That's the antidote.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Coffee is the antidote to all things.
Right. Absolutely. All right, Lexy, I'll turn it over to you. I know that obviously you spent some time down in Texas, spent some time up here in South Dakota as well, but kind of fill in the gaps for us there a little.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. So that's where my love of weather came from. Just everything that happened while I was growing up, I knew that I wanted to be a meteorologist in some form of fashion. I graduated high school and I didn't really know how to get into college or what to do because I didn't have, I guess, parents that could kind of help me through that because they didn't go to college themselves. So it was very difficult trying to navigate that path. And so the very first thing I did was send a message to NWS Amarillo, and I'm like, "Hey, I want to be a meteorologist. Is there anything that I can do, or any volunteering, anything that I can just get involved with that will help me in my future as I go through community college and decide on a future?" And so they allowed me to come into the office and visit, and then from then on, I was just volunteering all the time, as much as I possibly could be. All of my free time was spent at NWS Amarillo, except for the few occurrences where I did go chasing, but that was just a few. Um, but yeah, I was going to community college, trying to just get my basics in STEM before I needed to decide on where to go to university and figured that out. So I spent 2 years from 2017 to 2019. Um, just taking classes and at times working up to 3 jobs because I had to pay my way. I was living on my own. I needed to save up for university. So there was times I was working probably 45 hours a week, if not more than that, and going to community college and then spending all of my free time and days off at NWS Amarillo. And uh, really quickly, I'd love to say that every forecaster, every person at NWS Amarillo, including Stefan, have been amazing for me. Like truly paved the path for everything that I have accomplished right now. Because without them, I don't know if I would have been able to decide on going to South Dakota Mines or even getting into this career path because they were just the light in the darkness, and it was amazing. That office was my safe haven, and I'm so grateful for them. So a little bit down the path, some of the forecasters told me about their undergraduate school experiences and helped me create a pros and cons list of each university and costs of attendance. And I eventually decided on South Dakota Mines because one of the forecasters there did his grad school there. And it seemed like a beautiful place. I had never been to Dakota before. And I was like, you know what? That seems really cool. And it's far away from home. I want to get the experience of being away. So let's do it. And I transferred up there in 2019. I got my undergraduate, my bachelor's in atmospheric science in 2022. Yeah. And then I got my master's in 2023. Um, and that entire time that I spent up in South Dakota was really great. At the very beginning, whenever I first got there, I struggled very hard. I actually almost flunked out of my first semester because it was difficult and I did not have the study habits that I needed, and I was still trying to balance my time. But I finally told my story and explained my hardships to my advisor, and he sat me down and he's like, "All right, let's figure this out. Let's figure out your time, when you're going to be working, whenever you can go to school, when you can study, and when you can have time for friends." And that also helped me. So I've had a lot of mentors throughout my educational career, and I am so grateful for all of them. And then after I got my master's at South Dakota Mines, I was grateful to get this job here at the Warning Decision Training Division. So that's a bit of my background.
Cool. No, I appreciate that. And I'm grateful that you kind of pointed out some of your mentors along the way as well. But I mean, a lot of what got you to where you are is your determination as well. Putting in the hard work, putting in the extra hours, working multiple jobs in order to get to where you are. So you absolutely deserve everything that you've gotten and what you've gotten now. As an aside, South Dakota or Texas, where's the better place to chase?
South Dakota, 100%. I'm so sorry, Texas, but there's just less chasers in South Dakota, so it's easier to go around and see things. And the road network was a little bit more difficult, but is just, yeah, the Black Hills create the most gorgeous supercells that come off, and it's amazing, just beautiful.
Yep, just camp out in the Badlands and wait for the supercells off the Black Hills. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, and then try not to get hailed on.
So sticking with you, Lexi, I know that you had talked a little bit about maybe getting into an operational meteorologist career back when you were up here in South Dakota and on the board as well. What ultimately steered you away from that operational meteorologist track and towards, what you're doing now as an instructor?
So getting into the instructor role, I felt like would be good at the time because I am very people forward and I really enjoyed teaching whenever I had a teaching assistant role at South Dakota Mines. And so whenever I figured out that this job actually existed where I could be both a meteorologist and a teacher of sorts, I couldn't say no to just at least trying it out and seeing what it would be like. Um, and I still get to, I guess, interact with operational meteorologists on the daily, but I wouldn't say this has steered me fully away from operational meteorology. I mean, it's still a possibility in my future, but at least for now, I've really enjoyed doing what I'm doing.
Cool. That's what it's all about, is finding the ideal mix of like your skill set and your interests with your passions. So glad you've found that, at least temporarily. We'll see what comes from here or where you go from here. But yeah, sounds like you're happy there. So that's awesome. Stefan, since Lexi kind of touched on it, I wanted to go back to both, your experience as being a mentor to students coming up. And I wanted to ask you what sort of mentors you had along the way that encouraged you to get into meteorology potentially, or kind of helps shape your career as it's been.
Excellent question. Being a mentor is a joy. I'll start with that right now. It's always I have found great joy in watching early career and students find their way, explore their path, and gain entry into the career that they greatly desired to do. In fact, over the years, I think I've mentored over a dozen students, whether they're seeking bachelor, master, PhD, and also have had the fortune of helping out about a dozen or so early career professionals find their way through government service. And I believe that being a mentor is a way to pay it forward. Usually, a lot of the folks that I tend to mentor are either women or minority individuals because I myself am a minority of Filipino Americans. So there's really not a lot that those of us can turn to say, hey, this cultural experience you had growing up may or may not work in a setting of operations or government meteorology. And so I had a lot of great mentors over the course of my career. So I had at least three with the United States Air Force, all of whom were lieutenant colonels and majors who saw my potential and encouraged me to go into leadership roles and take on major projects. In fact, one of those individuals ended up becoming the chief operating officer of the National Weather Service, Colonel John Murphy at the time. And The project I worked on for him involved weather modeling. He saw that I had great skill in doing that sort of thing, and he said, you know what, why don't you help out with the U.S. Air Force Weather Agency and see if we can develop an ensemble for that reason. And then from there, when I joined the National Weather Service, the MIC at Pendleton, Oregon was my guiding light. I was like, okay, civilian world, coming over to the National Weather Service. I have no clue which way I'm going. I have no idea what up and down is at the moment. I've worked with NWS Tucson, but this was a rather rapid transition going from the desert Southwest to Pacific Northwest. And he really helped out, and he really saw where I was strongest. He pointed me towards things like programming in AWIPS, AWIPS 1, and then also allowing me to help with the AWIPS 1, AWIPS 2 transition at the time. He also allowed me to get out there and reach out to the local tribal communities and a lot of the minority communities that are on the eastern side of the Cascades, so that we could bring them in together and understand what their needs were, because that was one of our biggest vulnerable populations, was in that area east of the Cascades. And as you may or may not know, there's a lot of vineyards that are out there, and it's also very dry east of the Cascades, so we tend to get a lot of wildfires and significant drought impacts. From there, he saw that I should reclaim a position title that I once had with the U.S. Air Force, which was Science and Operations Officer, and was very vital to pointing me in that direction and allowing me the opportunity to act in that capacity for 3 months. And I really enjoyed it, and then was picked up by NWS Amarillo, and I had two awesome mentors over there. The first was the original MIC at that office. He had been there for like 20 years, but Mr. Jose Garcia was also one that, again, he himself was a minority. He understood a lot of the cultural backgrounds that I was going through as I was transitioning to a leadership role. And oh, by the way, when you go from leading people in the military to leading people on the civilian side, there's a little bit of a difference there. There's a slight approach that you have to take that's a little bit different. And he helped me through all of that during the years at Amarillo, Texas. And when he moved on to Weather Service headquarters at Southern Region, the next MIC I credit greatly is Mark Fox. And he saw my ability to really do large scale efforts. In fact, that's where a lot of our agency's efforts in fire detection came from, was my desire to be that first on the ground decision support idea for all the wildfires that tend to break out. And actually, it came to fruition during March 6, 2017. That'll be a date I'll never forget, which is when 1.2 million acres burned across most of the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles. We lost thousands of head of cattle. We lost over a dozen folks that were trying to flee the fires. And it really opened my eyes to the idea of we need to do something different. We need to do much more in the wildland fire space, and we need to work closely with our partners. I thought and saw at the time that wildland fire was going to be the #1 big issue as drought and climate change took a bigger impact. And so Mark, he was like, you've got this drive under you, you've got this passion. Why don't you do some time with Weather Service headquarters and see if that's a possible future for you? And so I detailed over and served as the Deputy Chief Learning Officer, and also helped NCEP do their strategic planning effort. And, still at the time, I was like, I really want to stay in the field. I really wanted to be someone that could lead a WFO, but it was Mark that said, your time here is coming to a close. I think you should head to a headquarters environment. And that's what led me to the National SU, as well as the current position that I sit in. So some of the mentors that I've had here are senior executives themselves. They have all shown me the light and the path, and I've also really appreciated the time that I spent with those within my community, like Ray Tanabe, the Pacific Region Headquarters Director. We've had a lot of great conversations about some of our culture that we can bring to benefit the agency. So really, mentoring is a joy, and it also is a way to pay back. And I'm really grateful for all the mentors that I've had over my career, as well as those that I've mentored, including Lexy, who I have been amazed by since she has gone through her career and joined WDTD and becoming a teacher there.
I was thinking as you were going through all this stuff, you talked about wild and fire there. I don't want to go back to your job title too much, but with severe fire, public and winter weather services, all of those are extremely important. Do you feel like there's one of those in particular that you get the most attention drawn to from, say, the White House or congressional staff or anything like that?
I would say two. The public weather and fire weather are the two biggest requests that I get here at headquarters. Public weather oversees extreme temperatures, air quality, also visibility products, things of that nature. But really, a lot of attention has been placed on heat because, as you saw earlier this year, Phoenix, Arizona was setting record after record for days on end, well into October. And Florida, it's still really hot down there. One of the things that we have been trying to do is reduce the number of fatalities and number of heat, health injuries that result from heat, which is the number one hazard that kills people in the United States. The other one that is starting to move up the list, unfortunately, rather quickly, is wildland fire. In fact, a lot of damage has been caused by wildfires over the years. We've had hundreds of fatalities resulting from people just trying to flee wildland fire. Some folks saying that they just barely had a moment's notice to just grab their stuff and run. And unfortunately, we've seen and heard reports of people getting caught as a result of trying to flee. And millions of acres. In fact, this year, I think we're at 7 or 8 million acres burned in the United States alone, with billions upon billions of dollars of resources spent to fight wildland fire, as well as the damage that has resulted. So those two have been a huge focus from the White House, from Congress, and from our senior leadership is what can we do to make this better? And so for heat side, one of the products we're experimenting with is heat risk. And then on the fire side, Oklahoma and Texas together have jointly brought together fire detection. In fact, the first ever fire weather test bed was on the fire warning integrated warning team concept of having land management agencies and the weather forecast office work together to try to get out a message to people that said, there's a fire here, here's the direction it's moving, here's safety information that can be provided, as well as where you can evacuate to. So those two initiatives in and of themselves occupy a lot of my time. It's not to say that winter and severe aren't important. In fact, they are just as important. And Keith, as you know, during your time with us, there was a lot of attention on what can we do better in the severe and tornado warning space. So of the precious time that I do get every day, I would say heat and fire occupy a good chunk of it, but severe and winter are still definitely in the fold there.
Yeah, Lexy and I were chatting before you hopped on, Stefan, about the drought up here and throughout really most of the country at this point. But talking about how the Black Hills are due for a large fire, but most of our fires this year have been the wildland fires, have been out on the plains where, okay, you don't quite hit red flag criteria, right? But you have extreme grassland fire danger because really strong winds, the vegetation's all dead and dried out and has been for quite some time. And it's remarkable how quickly those things can spread.
Absolutely. I would latest stat that I saw was about 75 to 78% of the country is experiencing some sort of abnormal dryness. Anywhere between 45 and 50% of the country is in some sort of drought. And we're seeing fires in places that don't normally experience them. In fact, we've just had some fires up here in New England and the Mid-Atlantic region that people aren't sure. It's like, okay, these are situations that don't normally impact this area. In fact, there was a streak of, I think, 38 days where we received no precipitation in the Mid-Atlantic, which is unprecedented. It was actually the #1 record-setting longest dry streak here in this region. And so, again, we're seeing impacts on a longer time scale that we are going to need to take action on, and is the reason why our focus has been on fire and on heat, because those are the two biggest impacts that we have always heard about from climate change, and they're becoming much more frequent these days.
Lexy, I'll start with you. Could you just give a brief rundown on all the different kind of public service or professional service positions you've held within AMS and beyond, and what it means to you to provide that service.
Yeah, so I started out with AMS BOGM, actually mostly because I saw Stefan was heavily involved in AMS, and I figured, hey, like this would probably be good for connections in the future, and it'd be a really good idea to just get involved in some form or fashion with AMS and additional volunteer work. So I became I believe it was ad hoc student member first off with AMS BOGM, and then I transitioned into a student member and stayed with you guys for a while. And that was really great. And I also got to help out with AMS Chala, which is like the Committee on Hispanic and Latinx. I think it's like an ambassador program. I don't remember the whole acronym, but yeah, I got to do that for a little while and got to be a student ambassador on that. And that was amazing as well. And then whenever I transitioned off of there, I got the opportunity to be part of an AMS executive community, which is I think it's AMOX, so AMS committee or oversight committee. Sorry, I'm getting everything mixed up because there's like way too many acronyms for everything. But yeah, so I've been on that oversight committee for AMS for almost 3 years now. I actually transition off of that this coming January. And then I just recently was accepted to be a member into AMS WAF, which is Weather Analysis and Forecasting Committee. Um, so all of this service is super important because I found different ways that whether you're on a board or a committee, everything just fits into the American Meteorological Society as a whole, and everybody has a different, I guess, perspective and way to assist. And that's just been amazing to see is just all of the different pathways that you can take with these different boards and committees.
Cool. Thank you, Lexi. Yeah, and I really appreciated your time as a student member on BOGM as well. You brought some very unique and helpful perspectives to the group. Stefan, I know you don't have enough going on in your day-to-day work life. So can you talk a little bit about what you do through AMS?
Time? What's that? Well, actually, I've been with AMS since 2002 when I joined as a student. 22 years. It's been a great opportunity. I always encourage students to join the AMS, become connected and involved with all the boards and committees that exist, because as you just heard from Lexi's story, you can go places and make connections that will serve you well beyond just the weather service or any of the operational entities that we do. The organization supports the entirety of the weather enterprise, where you've got you got the big name academic folks who do their work in meteorology space. Couple of folks that I can think of, like Dr. Aaron Hill, who serves on WAF, and he's helping lead the charge for AI machine learning for severe weather. And you have Dr. Kim Wood, who's an amazing, inspirational woman in the space of tropical meteorology. In fact, there's a lot of folks that tend to follow her as a result. And those are just a few examples. Of course, Lexi has followed me from BOGM to WAF, and it's been a joy to watch her grow in both spaces and make those connections. So I really became heavily involved in AMS in 2019. That seemed to be a year where both AMS Weather Analysis and Forecasting Committee and the Board for Operational Government Meteorologists brought me on board as a member. And right after that period, 2 years into my term, I was elected as vice chair for WAF and chair of AMS Board for Operational Government Meteorologists. And it's been amazing to make those connections across the weather enterprise, not just operations and not just weather service, but really to see how people approach some of the major hazards of the day and some of the big topics that we like to talk about, whether that's ranges from diversity, equity, and inclusion, all the way over to what is the latest approach to AI machine learning that we need to take? How about modeling and numerical weather prediction? What is the future of that going to look like? And during this time, it also allows you that opportunity to build your leadership skills and help you organize boards and committees, because BOGM has grown immensely since the time that I joined. There was 13 members. Now you're well over 20. And then WAF was a committee of 27, has been the entire time I've served on it. and being able to lead the conferences as well. As I've led conferences and symposia almost every year since 2020. AMS 100 was really that opportunity allowed me to link up with some of those senior leaders in multiple organizations, whether that's media, private sector, or public sector. The other part that I also started doing more of was I've been heavily involved in journal reviews, was doing that through my graduate school career. And in 2017, I was asked to be an associate editor to the Journal of Weather and Forecasting. And it just so happens that, 2021 was a big year because not only did I become chair and vice chair, but I was asked to become the editor for the AMS Journal of Weather and Forecasting. And just to see all of the great research that is going on and to be a referee over that process has been eye-opening. And it shows really where our research enterprise is going and allows someone like me to help anticipate what is going to be the next major thing in weather forecasting that I should try to consider to bring into the agency. And so this year concludes my second year as chair of AMS Committee on Weather Analysis and Forecasting, and I've been fortunate to be invited by the AMS Council to serve as the commissioner for the AMS Scientific and Technological Activities Commission starting next year. So overseeing close to about 450 volunteers of the AMS that do all the work in science and all the work in technology is going to be an amazing experience. And I get to do so under the commissioner, Clark Evans, who was also the previous chair of AMS WAF. So lots of those small connections carry through, and it's going to, I'm excited to see what the future brings.
So in 5 years, you'll be the AMS president and the NWS director then? We continue on this path?
Yeah, that seems to be what people are encouraging, I guess. I'm enjoying what I do, and this has been a fun ride to be on.
Well, thank you for your service, Stefan. And I know everyone at AMS is really appreciative, and I'm appreciative to have made the connection with you when I did on BOGM and Lexy as well. But as we kind of turn towards wrapping things up here, because I know we're getting short on time, you said something there that made me think between your job at NWS headquarters, in your roles through AMS, you really have your thumb on the weather enterprise on the whole. So what sort of advice would you have for students or prospective operational government meteorologists, what to expect going forward, but also what to keep in mind as they start applying for some of these jobs?
Yeah, I would say that students should build a strong academic base and pursue internships like Lexy has, student volunteer opportunities, pathway internships. If you haven't heard about those, definitely look that up. LaPenta internships, volunteer roles, and it doesn't have to just necessarily be with the federal government. Obviously, Lexy and I are biased because we work in that space, but there are other organizations that will take you on. The FEMA hires meteorologists as well. Aviation space hires meteorologists. There are private sector corporations that have internships. Keep your eyes open to all of those, because in my case, I went academic first, then went military, and then concluded it with the civilian sector side of business. I also want to emphasize the importance of continuous learning and networking, because you want to stay up with the advancements, especially in emerging technologies. It gives you an idea of where the enterprise is headed so that you can make yourself marketable in that space. If you know that there's a big move in, for example, AI machine learning, and you want to be able to program in that space, it makes yourself much more marketable and much more available for some of the future opportunities that may exist out there. Another thing that we saw over the last 5 to 10 years is a rapid shift away from just making the forecast to communicating the forecast. And for those that have watched it over the last 10 years, this is something that's been rapidly communicated not only in just AMS, but in multiple organizations through impact-based decision support services. So staying on top of that would have shown you an evolution of the career field. I expect that over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a rapid and significant shift in the career of what it takes to become a meteorologist. what Lexy and I have experienced, and yourself as well, Keith, over the last few years is not going to look the same over the next 3 to 5 because of the advent of new technologies and new capabilities. The last thing I would say is that there's great value in leadership and service. And so engaging in professional organizations like the AMS, National Weather Association is another one that I see a lot of our colleagues in, or the American Geophysical Union, allows you to not only just go in and work within the committees and boards that may exist, but make those connections, not just linked to the public sector, but broadly across the enterprise as a whole. In my case, I've also been involved in the Asian American Government Executives Networks and FAPAC, which is the Federal Asian Pacific American Council. So what this allows me to do is also connect with my community that also works across the entirety of federal government. And it's not just my profession in meteorology. I get to see it from their perspective, whether it is health or it is being the lawyers of the organization. There's a lot of military members that serve on that organization as well. And just to see what their day-to-day is and where leadership as a whole is going in federal service. And so those are some examples that I would offer to the early careers and as well as students that are considering what is the future of their career going to look like.
Very good. Lots to chew on there for prospective students and employees here. Lexy, I'll turn it over to you. You're a little bit closer to the recent student phase. So talk a little bit about, what you learned over the last year or so, transitioning from being a student to working at WDTD, and just kind of what you've heard, through the grapevine about where the career may be going.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I did want to highlight on is the challenges and the things that you will face as you start to transition into early career. So whether that's like applying to jobs, like I applied to well over 50 different jobs, and some of them I didn't hear back from, some of them I did, and they were like, actually, we want someone within the next 2 weeks, not in the next couple of months. And there's just a lot of challenges that come across, and it's just taking those and learning from them and trying not to get too down about it, because it's all a learning experience. Like doing these exit interviews or getting interview practice with some of these people, even though you may not be offered the job, you got an idea of how to communicate with the interviewing panel or all these people from different areas of meteorology. Um, Additionally, uh, getting into early career, it's a very difficult transition from being in college to having a job where you are no longer constantly thinking about your next, I guess, assignment, or constantly having that level of stress over you and having those dreams like, oh my gosh, I failed this exam, or yeah, like what am I going to do next week, or I have this like final exam coming up I need to study for. Whereas like my job now, it's like everything's kind of calmed down a little bit. I still have deadlines, I still have things I need to do, but it's getting out of that mindset of where I need to complete anything and everything very quickly, but it's more of doing things methodically and, um, yeah, just being open to new opportunities as well. Um, yeah, there's just a lot that has changed recently and things I am still learning and I'm still asking questions about from people who have been in their careers for a very long time. So, uh, that does lead into my next one. Make sure to ask questions. Always ask people who have been either in your shoes or are in places that maybe you want to be in the future, and continue to develop those relationships and even stick with your mentors like Stefan. Last time he was here, I asked him questions and got a really good advice from him on things that I want to do in the future. And that's super important in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that closing point there, to ask questions. It's you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to know who to ask to get the answers, right? So, well, Lexy, Stefan, I know we're got about 10 minutes left in the hour here. So I wanted to wrap up and thank you both again for taking the time out of your busy schedules to sit down and chat. I think it's really important for folks to hear the origin stories of folks, especially those from underrepresented portions of the population within meteorology. So thank you again. Any final words, any things that we didn't touch on that you want to share with the audience?
Well, I think I'll say it's been a pleasure to be a part of this. And I agree with Lexy. Always ask questions, always be curious, and always be flexible, because you don't know what the future will bring. And the way that our technology and our profession is moving is going places, and it's going to be a rapid transition for a lot of folks. Though I think if you are able to stay on top of what is happening and get an understanding of where things could be going to the future, you'll be well prepared in this profession.
Lexy, any last words?
Thank you for having me, and I'm always here to help out with BOGM and talk to some of the members as well if needed. So, thank you.
Sounds good. Do you mind if I put your email addresses on here? So, okay. Just give Stefan some time. He may take a little while to sift through all his email or he responds to you.
Just give me a moment.
Yep. All right. Well, we will see what tomorrow brings. And thank you both for being here. For folks in the audience, have a happy holiday season. And again, my name is Keith Sherburn. I'm the chair of the AMS Board for Operational Government Meteorologists, and I appreciate you watching. We'll see if we have any more of these before the year is out. Take care.